Meep.
Alright, I'm just gonna be pretty blunt with you here for a second. Coraline was a film I never understood the hype for. I saw it when it released in 2009, and it left zero impression on me, which, in hindsight, doesn't make any sense. I've been obsessed with stop motion animation practically since I was born, and I was in the midst of discovering my love of the horror genre when Coraline released, so really it should have been my favorite movie ever at the time. But for whatever reason, it just did not click with me at all. But over the course of the last 14 years since that initial watch, I've still never fully forgotten about it. Mainly because Coraline fans are very passionate. What I mean to say is that they never stop talking about it. So I decided to finally rewatch it the other night, and honestly, I think I finally get it. Coraline is a deceptively simple film. You don't have to read into it very deeply at all in order to appreciate it. It completely works as a simple and effective dark fairy tale for children, one that warns of the dangers of manipulation, temptation, and greed, one which is told through absolutely dazzling animation, fantastic character and world design, and expressive voice acting. But if you do decide to look a bit deeper, Coraline reveals itself to be a much more elaborate and brilliant film than it appears at first glance. This film is the embodiment of the phrase, "small details make a big picture." Spoilers for Coraline. In my interpretation, Coraline is a film that is entirely about perspective. Perspective as a motif is intricately woven into every story beat in the entire film. Coraline starts her story in a muted world of grayness, her yellow raincoat and blue hair being some of the only bright colors you get to see during the opening act. We learn that Coraline is generally put off by other people and tends to look down on them. Coraline's parents appear lethargic, uncaring, and maybe even a bit resentful of their own daughter.
I almost fell down a well yesterday, Mom.
Uh-huh.
I would have died.
That's nice.
After her dad appeals to Coraline's explorative nature and tasks her with counting all the windows and doors in their new apartment, we get a taste of how Coraline sees the world around her.
One boring blue boy in a painfully boring painting.
So when she discovers a tunnel to a strange new world, just the vibrancy of its color palette alone, combined with knowing how naturally explorative she is, immediately sells why venturing in would be so enticing for her. Beyond the obvious extravagant dinner she is presented with, complete with a gravy train, even the smallest detail, like a painting on the wall, illustrates how Coraline sees this world in comparison to her own. She is shown many wonders in this world thanks to her other mother and other father, and is promised a wonderful life in exchange for one thing. And this is where the idea of perspective started to become incredibly obvious to me.
Soon you'll see things our way.
Again and again, eyes and the ability to see are central parts of the story. Whether it be the button eyes of the other world's inhabitants, or the ghost eyes of the children, which are only found by using a planchette that Coraline must look through in order to find them.
A ghost's eye is lost in plain sight.
Even in a small moment where Coraline starts to connect with her neighbor Wybie, who she was previously hostile toward, she does it by literally looking at him through a different lens. There's even a moment just before this where Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, two of the other neighbors, read tea leaves and argue about whose perspective on the reading is correct.
I see a very peculiar hand.
I see a giraffe.
As Coraline begins to learn more about this other world she finds herself trapped in, she quickly realizes that it only reaches as far as she wanted to see.
She only made what she knew would impress you.
How can you walk away from something and still come back to it?
Walk around the world.
Small world.
In the end, when Coraline defeats the other mother and frees her captive parents, things didn't necessarily go the way I would have expected. In a typical children's film, there would have been like a huge change of heart from the parents after these horrific events, but in Coraline, they carry on as if nothing happened at all. In fact, no one in Coraline's life really changes as a result of her journey. Coraline's real world is nearly exactly the same at the beginning as it is at the end, apart from the one thing that has changed: Coraline's perspective. For most of the film, Coraline had been seeing her entire world only through her own lens, seeing everyone around her as an extension of herself. My parents won't pay attention to me. This boy is annoying to me. All of my neighbors are so strange to me.
You're just like them. Huh? I meant my parents. They don't listen to me either.
She saw her world as only drab and gray, so that's what it became. Even if you go back and look at the beginning of the film, her parents really weren't as uncaring as they initially seemed.
If things go well today, I promise I'll make it up.
That's what you always say.
Coraline just wanted a world where everything and everyone catered to her, a world that existed only as she thought it should. So really, the other mother, in many ways, is just an extreme manifestation of Coraline's mentality about the world. Coraline and the other mother both share the impulse to control and curate everything around them.
This piano plays me.
But because of the journey that Coraline goes on defeating the other mother, by the time that her world returns to normal, the colors still appear more vibrant. Suddenly she's asking other people personal questions.
How are the Mushkas, Mr. B?
They tell me that you are savior, Caroline.
She's coming to the defense of her strange neighbors.
Mr. B's not drunk, Mom. He's just eccentric.
Her ability to see others as individuals and embrace the differences, her ability to change her perspective, changed her entire world, which honestly I think is a great thing for children to take away from a film like this. Children, understandably, are very self-oriented. It is very difficult to get them to try and see the world outside of themselves. A lot of other children's films would just sort of cater to that instinct and show that a child can only be happy when they finally get exactly what they want. But I think Coraline gives them something more nourishing and truthful, at least in my experience. As I've grown older and I've gotten more experience with the world and people who have different experiences of the world than I do, the more and more I've come to realize that sometimes just changing how you see things can actually be enough to change your world for the better. So ironically, I think that's why Coraline worked so much better for me as an adult, now that I have the benefit of being able to watch it with a bit of distance from my childhood and a lot of perspective of my own.